everyone. Welcome to our session today on resiliency in a post-2020 world. We want to review some trends coming out of 2020, including hybrid multi-cloud and the growth of that, as well as remote PC to access machines during the pandemic, as well as the growth of DaaS, which is desktop as a service. My name is Wendy Gay. I'm a sales engineer for the UK and I market, but I'm also a senior manager for the pre-sales specialist team in EMEA, and I'm joined today by Gavin Connolly.
Hi everybody, my name is Gavin Connolly. I am a pre-sales engineer specialist. I'm based at Citrix Dublin and work with all our customers across EMEA.
Great. So I want to kick off today by talking about what we're going to cover. We're going to cover disruption and change. As I said, we've had a lot of disruption and change in 2020, and we want to talk about how that's affecting businesses and organizations across the globe and trends we're seeing. We also want to talk about utilizing existing hardware and how you can make use of hardware in your data center as well as on-prem in offices around the world. We also want to talk about the trend towards a distributed workload where people are now stretching to cloud to provide services and products to their users who are working remotely to get their work done. And finally, we want to talk about security challenges and how we address them in an environment where we have a distributed workload and we have remote workers. And when we talk about disruption and change, I think it's fair to say 2020 has had its fair share of disruption and change. But I think while this, hopefully, pandemic isn't permanent, what we want to talk about is how it's taught us to be prepared for this level of disruption in the future. We need to be able to adapt and we need to be able to change how people get their work done in an instant if need be. So our platforms need to be inherently flexible and give businesses that ability to adapt as needed. So as a result of that disruption, we've seen market shifts too. Change. We've 2/3 of IT executives accelerating their adoption of cloud. 82% of managers and leaders are now open to their employees working remotely, at least some of the time, because they see the productivity gain that gives them. We also have 60% of enterprises who will phase out a traditional VPN solution in favor of a zero trust network access solution instead. But that does bring common challenges, and those common challenges are an increased security risk, potentially poor employee experience, and the challenges to avoid a slow, inconsistent experience for users across devices and locations that could impact on productivity. We also want to make sure that remote workers who have bring your own device policies and strategies, who are using unsanctioned applications and have an increased attack surface are safe. And when we look at that, and when we look at a good technology foundation, what's key to that is to make sure that businesses are flexible and they have the ability to adapt. They need to be able to adapt to number one, business critical disruptions. So that could be a system outage, it could be a snow day, a power outage, a new competitor in the market that requires them to pivot quickly, or a pandemic as we've all seen right now in 2020. But it also is an enabler for business growth and innovation. You might want to embrace more cloud services and spin up in different regions and different areas quickly. You might want to get day one value from mergers and acquisitions, service innovation, and to embrace new sustainability initiatives. But finally, then it gives us that springboard for workforce and talent strategies, where we have the ability to deploy content collaboration tools quickly, enable bring your own device initiatives, have talent acquisition and retention plans to make sure our users get a really good experience, both now and in the future, as well as embracing new hiring models where we are not curtailed by boundary of any physical location. And when we talk about our Citrix portfolio, we're really talking about choice for today as well as the ability to change and adapt in the future. The Citrix portfolio is designed to meet employee expectations today, but also as those expectations evolve to be able to adapt when required. From a device perspective, we have different operating systems. We've Chrome, we've Windows, we've Linux. We want to support that diverse user base. When we talk about applications, we're talking about a mix of application types. We're talking about SaaS, web apps, and virtual desktops. but we also want to support data and any file solutions that are being used. And when we talk about identity providers, we're really talking about the ability to bring your own identity, whether that's Azure, Okta, Ping, or Google. And if you choose to have your workload location, we will allow you to have that workload location in both on-prem or cloud, or both. So you have choices to where your workloads reside. If you do stretch into public cloud providers, you have the ability to choose from Azure, Google, AWS, and you don't have vendor lock-in in that space. You can have both, you can have all of them, or you could have just one, or you could change that decision, and that's totally up to you as an organization. Finally, then we have different form factors and support for that. So whatever makes sense to your organization, whether that's a virtual appliance, a hardware appliance, whether that's a container or bare metal, we have the ability to support that and support that organization going forward. I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about one organization and a case study, and it's Discover Financial. So Discover Financial not only had the pandemic to deal with, they also had a 5.7 magnitude earthquake to deal with at the very same time. And they managed to move 95% of their call center agents from close quartered cubicles in their homes to remote locations in 14 days. And the reason they were able to do this was because it just accelerated where they were already headed anyway. They had worked on creating a remote workforce already. They had certain use cases where they used remote working for those end users. It was good for their workers, it was good for their customers, and it was good for their business because they were able to reduce costs. So this investment that they already put in up front allowed them to, one, quickly mobilize and have 95% of their workers working remotely, but it also helped them to ensure the safety of their workers during the pandemic while still providing a really good experience for their customers. I wanted to spend a little bit of time then delving into utilizing existing hardware and talking about a feature called Remote PC. It's not a new feature, but we've seen the uptake of Remote PC skyrocket in 2020, particularly in the beginning of the year. So for anyone who's unaware of what Remote PC can do, Remote PC is going to allow you to have high definition user experience and connect to physical devices in offices while users are working remotely. It's included in virtual apps and desktop service, so the return on investment is very quick. And we can, for IT admin, provide automated scripts that will allow them to provision and securely install and configure the software to deliver Remote PC quickly. And this will avoid what you can see here on the screen, which is 29% of remote PCs or desktop PCs sitting idle as people work from home. We want to make sure that organizations get the best use of that hardware they possibly can while they can. And I want to talk about two common scenarios that we have seen specifically. We've seen both dedicated access to remote PC and also pooled. So when I'm talking about dedicated, I'm really talking about a specific user who has a PC in their office or in their cubicle and they connect remotely to that. So they get a really familiar experience. They get to see their machine as if they were sitting in front of it, but they get to access it securely, remotely with a really good user experience. So that's how we access it in a dedicated way. But what we then see in healthcare and education is we see the ability to use pooled remote PCs. So when you think about a computing lab, you might have high-end users who use really high-tech kit in a lab. You want to make sure you get the most use out of that. So what we can do from a remote PC perspective here is we can pool a bunch of machines together, for example, in a classroom or in a lab, and we can cycle through those machines throughout the day without any specific user being assigned to that machine. So as you come into a classroom, you get logged on, your class is over, the next person gets logged on to that machine. So you really are getting the best possible return on investment on that machine that you possibly can. So I just wanted to quickly touch on the architecture of remote PC. So we have our control layer, we have our resource layer, and we have our users. So when we're talking about the control layer, we're really talking about the management components that are used to support and control the Citrix environment, and that includes the site design for the cloud services also. So Citrix will look after all of that. We'll make sure it's updated. We'll make sure it's configured. It's HA, and all. You don't need to worry about that as a customer. And then you will connect to the resource layer. So the resource layer is where your workloads reside. So the resource layer is where those physical machines would be. So if it was a college, it will be where the classrooms are based. If it's an office, it'll be where your head office is based. We will use 2 Citrix Cloud connectors in that resource location, connecting up to our Citrix Cloud service. And then our users at home will be able to access those physical machines via our Citrix Cloud service securely using our HDX protocol to do so. And finally, I wanted to talk about an example of a project that we worked on at the beginning of the pandemic, where we worked with University of Sussex. They went from having no virtual apps and desktops cloud-based service to having a cloud-based service up and running, logged on, onboarded. We ran through a pilot. We had remote machines up and running in less than a week. And from that, the project then grew to 1,000 students to now finally 3,000 students, or 3,000 staff, sorry, and 19,000 students that can connect and work remotely. But not only that, it's now meant that they can embrace and expand that platform for new distance learning initiatives that they have in the future. So now they have the ability to adapt and grow as needed. So I'm going to hand over to Gavin now, who's going to talk about hybrid multi-cloud.
Thanks, Wendy. So, as Wendy correctly said, a lot of customers engaged in remote PC towards the beginning of the pandemic. But as we headed into late 2020 and now into 2021, we see that a lot of customers are looking for the future solution. And with that, a lot of them are turning to a hybrid multi-cloud solution. For that, they're looking and turning to Citrix Cloud Services. They're doing that for a number of reasons. First of all, the flexibility that hybrid cloud functionality gives them. It makes their business more agile. Secondly, it gives that faster time to value. As Wendy said, we've had a number of POCs and pilots over the last year where our organizations have gotten up and running within a couple of weeks. This is also a simplified business continuity and disaster recovery scenario. So when we talk about the Citrix Cloud service, we're talking about the Citrix Cloud Management Plane. This is the service hosted in the cloud, Citrix as a service. All upgrades, maintenance is taken care of by Citrix, and then the resource locations are taken care of by the organization. So we can put those resource locations wherever is best for the organization's use case, whether that be on a hypervisor on-prem, in a data center, or indeed in a public cloud. And when we look at our Citrix solution, our Citrix stack, that includes our Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service, our Citrix Endpoint Management Service, and our Content Collaboration. This allows users to have access to desktops, Windows apps, web and SaaS applications, even mobile applications, and indeed their files. All of these services support that hybrid multi-cloud approach. That means that they can have a combination of resources on-premise and across various public clouds simultaneously. This is all underlined by the service management, which includes our monitoring and analytics services. We'll talk a bit more about them later on. So it is important to note that throughout this year and beyond, Citrix has worked hard to bolster their partner ecosystem, whether that be the application partners such as ServiceNow, SAP, and Salesforce, where we see increased functionality with our micro app service, or indeed our cloud partners, the renewed partnership with Microsoft Azure and also AWS and Google Cloud Platform, but also our security partners and transformation partners as well. A great use case to point out is one that we worked on here on the team, where we helped a leading European financial organization who had 13 data centers distributed all across the globe, and they took the opportunity of the pandemic to transition to that hybrid multi-cloud approach, bringing that down to 3 resource locations, which allows them to scale up and down as they need to, whether that be for a business continuity reason or just naturally as the business grows and detracts. Moving on then, another huge trend that we've seen this year and beyond is the second pandemic of 2020 and coming into 2021, that is security threats. An Interpol assessment of the impact of COVID-19 on cybercrime has shown a significant shift from the individual and small businesses to major corporations, governments, and critical infrastructure. And what we've seen is just headline after headline throughout the last year showing exactly the alarming rate of the increase in attacks. So with that in mind, Citrix has gone on to take a zero trust strategy, never trusting and always verifying. So what does that mean? When we look at the Citrix workspace and Citrix solutions, we talk about a simple, very secure, single sign-on process. But then once inside the solution, the users are continuously monitored based on identity, device, location and time, apps and desktops, and network. Then we evaluate the risk based on those form factors, which is centrally viewed, monitored, and enforced by the administration team of the organization. We can then apply policies, more restrictive or less restrictive, based on these form factors. Contextual access is going to be key for your end users, both to help their end user experience and also for the security of the organization. This means that users only see the resources that they need to do their best work. It makes it more secure for the organization as a whole. Another interesting trend that we saw was the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Standard for Azure, our DaaS solution, become more topical and relevant over the pandemic and beyond. This is our simple turnkey solution that has bundled Azure capacity and flexible billing, including monthly options.
Thanks, Gavin. I think it's worth saying that remote PC access is now also part of Virtual Apps and Desktop Standard. So if you need access to Windows physical machines, Linux machines, for example, located in an office, and provide that access via our Citrix HDX technology, then you can do that as part of that Virtual Apps and Desktop Standard solution.
Absolutely, thanks, Wendy. And it's reasons like that why we've seen a number of different use cases come to the fore with the Virtual Apps and Desktop Standard offering. Seasonal workers and mergers and acquisitions, but also frontline workers as well. The pay-as-you-go model helps bolster these use cases. Interestingly as well, this solution supports domain and non-domain joined workloads. We had a very interesting use case on our team where we helped a leading medical organization leverage non-domain joint machines via Virtual Apps and Desktop Standard for Azure. They had a very unique use case where they wanted a completely separated environment, a non-domain joint environment, isolated from their regular environment in case anything happened to the domain or there was any sort of cyber attack on the domain. This separate environment allowed them to switch their users over and get back up and running within 24 hours. So as we shift towards 2021 and going further into 2021, we see that a focus is on the workspace experience. We have a unified experience where we have a secure single sign-on to the workspace, where we have all apps, virtual, SaaS, and web included. All our desktops, including on-prem, that includes our remote PC that we talked about before, our cloud, and our DaaS solution that we just talked about. And even our files as well are on-prem and cloud files. This means that end users have a consistent work experience, whether that be on a shared workstation, personal devices from home maybe, corporate laptops that they take home with them, or indeed even mobile devices as well. When we deliver a consistent and secure workspace experience for these end users and the employees of these organizations, we give those individuals success, whether that be connecting via remote PC, connecting to a virtual resource in one of those hybrid multi-cloud environments, or indeed using our DaaS solution. We give those users success using the Citrix workspace, which leads, of course, to organizational success. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone.